Alcatraz, a name to bring desolation and fear to men from its earliest days, as a symbol of punishment, as a sign of man's inability to cope with man without violence and repression, a place of unkindness and brute force, and hatred, and inhumanity. Alcatraz. They called it the Island of Pelicans, the first Spaniards who saw it when they came here in the 18th century. That was all that was there. Pelicans, seagulls, and rock. Almost no soil and certainly no water. The Indians of the surrounding Bay Area thought the place was damned. Perhaps they were more right than any of the white men who would try to make use of the ugly outcropping in San Francisco Bay during the next 2 centuries. Alcatraz started with Indians and seagulls. And who knows? Perhaps these will be the sole survivors at the end. I'm Howard Duff. As an actor, I'm deeply interested in drama, and this is possibly one of the most dramatic pieces of land in the world. As a human being and an actor who started out playing prison roles, I'm fascinated with what has transpired in this most famous of penitentiaries. So I tried to learn what has taken place there from the very beginning. It's an extraordinary story, a story of lives hidden away and largely forgotten by society in the name of society. Since the beginning of man's history, he's imprisoned his fellow man on small islands. Elba and St. Helena are probably best known to people who've read history. The Chateau d'If in the harbor of Marseille, and infamous Devil's Island in French Guiana. The United States has had its share of sea-bound dungeons before Alcatraz. Deer Island in Boston Harbor, Welfare Island off Manhattan, and in the Dry Tortugas, the foul Bastille where Dr. Mudd spent so many years for having set the leg of Lincoln's assassin. In 1775, a few months before the U.S. Constitution was signed, a not very important lieutenant of Portola's discovery expedition named Juan de Ayala had himself rowed around the island. He didn't bother to go ashore the forbidding little outcropping. He just marked a small circle on his map and called the place, quite casually, like a mongrel dog met on the street, Isla de los Alcatraces, Isle of Pelicans. It was 1,675 feet long, 590 feet wide, 135 feet high at mean tide. Not a very impressive piece of real estate. The Spaniards put a few guns there, nothing else. When the United States took over in 1849, General Fremont bought the place for $5,000 and put a lighthouse on it. A few years later, in 1868, it became a prison for the Army. First for Confederates caught on the West Coast, then for rebellious Indian chiefs, Geronimo among them. Finally, for tough soldier convicts. It was not until 1934, in the last hours of Prohibition, that Alcatraz really became a total, full-fledged dungeon, when the Federal Bureau of Prisons took over and turned it into a maximum security institution for the worst hoodlums of the worst hoodlum era America had ever known. For such wild criminal turbulence, FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover and James V. Bennett, head of the United States Bureau of Prisons, agreed they had no choice other than total seclusion of the nation's top lawbreakers. The Rock. Early on the morning of October 11, 1934, after having been transported via a secret and circuitous route from the United States Penitentiary at Leavenworth, Kansas, the first batch of convicts arrived, barged across in their railway cars from the Western Railhead at Benicia, California, 2 miles across the bay from Alcatraz. Handcuffed and leg-ironed behind the barred windows of the coaches were 137 of the nation's toughest gunmen, most of them bank and mail robbers, many murderers and jailbreakers, all troublemakers in the eyes of prison people. They were guarded by over 60 special agents of the FBI, United States Marshals, railway security men. Escape was impossible. Awaiting them at their destination was a specially selected and trained staff of 155 guards. No rehabilitation technicians or recreation supervisors as in other prisons. Recreation and rehabilitation weren't matters of consideration at the nation's #1 dungeon. Here, security was the name of the game. Repressions didn't count. The chaplain could take care of the humanitarian needs when there was time. Heading up the welcoming committee were two iron men, James Johnson, the first warden of the Rock, and J.E. Shuttleworth, the associate warden and disciplinarian. They were to operate by the book. It was a hard book. As one man put it several years later in federal court, where he'd gone to protest conditions at the prison, you get justice all right, just ICE. Alvin Karpus, member of the notorious Barker gang of the 1930s, served the longest continuous sentence on the Rock. In retrospect of 33 years, his recollections of his own arrival still are vivid.
Here's the message everybody got there. We got nothing here, and we don't pretend to have anything for you. No rehabilitation, we don't care. Just make it light on yourself. That was the message.
And that message meant, in effect, that you would be adequately fed and clothed and given a bunk to sleep in, provided you obeyed the rules. But there would be nothing else you could expect. No recreation, no hobbies, nothing.
But there was no hobbies there, no. They didn't encourage any hobbies there. They wanted this thing as downright simple so they could control it, you see. Some of the people that were the biggest boosters for the place in connection in high places with the Bureau of Prisons say now that even the memory of it should be wiped from the face of the earth. Well, that's rather ironical when they were the ones that instituted and installed the system.
The Rock's new guests weren't exactly put at ease by the opening amenities.